2022. So the first thing we need to go over is meetings and minutes. Before we get to minutes, I want to talk about upcoming meetings. I put on the agenda that I'd like to propose that we do 2 meetings a month for the next 6 months to catch up on the backlog. I had promised that I would get you a list of agenda topics and so forth. But upon leaving the meeting last week, I had a family issue and it has taken up my time. So I do plan to get that out to you, but I do want to make sure we get these the schedule updated and get through some of these topics. So I'd like to ask the board, the dates are there on the agenda for January 25th, the 22nd of February, the 22nd of March, the 26th of April, 24th, and 28th of June. I don't expect you will know your schedules off the top of your head, but a second Wednesday morning, do you think most of you can make those dates? Why don't we start with Wendy?
Brian, I can make most of the dates. You know, I have recurring Wednesday meetings, so there may be times when I have to drop at 9. But I'll make every attempt to stay as long as I can.
Great, thank you. Pam, do you feel you'd be available for a second Wednesday each month?
Yeah, with recognizing that I have things that might come up that will make it impossible, but I'll make it, like Wendy, I'll make every effort to make the meetings.
Excellent. And Alice, your thoughts?
I also can usually make 2 meetings a month. I do not believe I will be here that February date.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the only one that I currently see an immovable come.
Okay. As long as we have a quorum for those dates, we can move forward. Wendy.
Yeah, Brian, just a comment. So I guess, I don't think the onus should be on you for putting that whole agenda out right away, but I think we as a board need to talk about what we're trying to accomplish and make sure that we're all agreeing on sort of the scope and the sequencing of the discussion. So just think that would be worth a discussion in and of itself. Not right now, but at some point, yeah.
So I have that's what that document I have going is a collection of those topics we've accrued over time. I sent a long email to Dave about the topics that we have to work on, and there's quite a lot. I can when I get time, I will get out those topics to you and get feedback from you on what we need to accomplish. It's definitely not solely on me, but I don't mind quarterbacking it.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, and respect that it's about getting to time of use and all those things that need to be included. So. Yeah,
as well as middle school solar in a public meeting, nuclear in a public meeting, and there's a huge number of things. That's why I'm asking for these meetings, and also it will help us keep after a topic and drive it to conclusion. That's what I got a little feedback. Okay, so minutes. I did see a set of minutes go around, and I thought they were good. I didn't give any feedback to you, Pam, but do you feel that they're ready to move forward?
Yeah, as I said in my email, I got comments from Warren and Wendy, and I've incorporated them, and I think we've got a good set of minutes. So I recommend that we move forward and approve them.
Okay.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from October 12th as distributed by Pam.
I'll second.
I don't think you can second, so I'll second.
Thank you.
I think the chair can't second.
All right, and I'm going to go around. Alice.
Yes.
Wendy.
Yes.
Pam.
Yes.
And I also agree. So we finished those minutes. Excellent. And the next topic on the agenda is Dave's update. You want to take it from here, Dave? Oh, I think you're muted, Dave.
All right, sorry about that. Sent out my update yesterday. Sorry it was late. So we continue to work on the Concord Middle School solar project. We issued the distribution design to SMMA in November, so they have that and they're working with that. Solar Design Associates, SMMA, and myself met earlier in the week, and we're working through the conduit runs to the canopies and making sure they're aligned with the bioswale, so there's no conflicts. So that's a pretty big undertaking. And the other big piece is working with planning and land management on the permitting aspect for the canopies and the setbacks. So making some progress, a lot of pieces, a lot of moving parts, but we're getting there. Their SMMA is getting closer to issuing the bid. So I think everything's aligning well, and we'll continue to work on the project and move forward. Joe and I met with Eversource. As you might recall, they came to us looking to see if we would be willing to provide power to neighboring communities. And our big request was, well, how much are you looking for? And we finally got the numbers. They gave us 4 scenarios, and 4 scenarios for Great Road in Acton, and looking for an average of approximately 30 amps at 13.8 or 720 kW. They'd be looking, if they had an outage, to have that increase. Their best case scenario would be for us to provide 300 amps or 7.2 MVA. That's probably not doable, and we said as much. And then a less desirable for them, but still something they're interested in, is if we could top out at about 100 amps. So we're going to run the numbers and look at the circuits and all that and see what, if any, is achievable, and get back to them. So that's the latest on that piece. More to come as we go through it. The line cruises, I hope everyone has seen, as they completed the installation of the holiday lights in the tree, and the tree lighting went off quite well. So another piece that's not really related to our normal duties, but the guys did it, and they do a good job. So that was good. On the energy management side, just a couple items. CMOP's launched its commercial EV charging solar rebate program, EV charging station rebate program, to help provide electric vehicle charging at workplaces, apartments, condominiums, schools, shops, and more. Concord businesses and multi-dwelling properties can get up to a $6,000 rebate for the installation of a level 2 charging station. CMOP rebate is in addition to the charging station rebates available through the Mass EVIP program. CMOP's funding is designed, when combined with Mass EVIP rebate, to cover a substantial portion of the cost of installing a typical $30,000 dual port charging station. Customers can access program information on CMOP's rebates for your business's webpage. In order to be eligible for either CMOP's rebate or Mass EVIP, customers must request a rebate pre-approval and receive the rebate award letter from each program prior to charging station installation. And as always, we have EV specialists that are available to help the customers prepare the applications for both the CMOP and Mass EVIP rebate program. As of October 31st, CMOP had already documented the installation of 105 heat pumps in Concord. That's a record number for us, and we have many more in the works. So that number should be higher as we close out the year. At the end of November, we received our 500th heating and cooling coaching request. So that's pretty big. We started that in February of 2021. It's more than one request every day and a half. So that is proven to be a very valuable function for our customers. And that's my update.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions about Dave's update? Otherwise, we'll move on to broadband.
No
Seeing none.
questions.
Jason, would you like to give us your broadband update?
Yes, thank you, Brian. I'm happy to mention that in attendance today, we've got Dale Hartling, who is our new broadband manager. I wanted everybody to be able to just put a face to the name and welcome him to the team. He's been working for Concord Broadband for just about 2 months now, and he's doing a great job getting a sense for how we've done things, but also with an eye toward improving operations. So we're just really pleased with Dale and glad that he's on the team. He has 30 years of network management experience and was most recently at Cisco for two decades, and brings a lot of skills and knowledge to the role. So we're just very excited that Dale is with us, and I just wanted everybody to be able to see who he was. For other updates, we are in active recruitment for 2 positions now. We had a network engineer position that we had a candidate with a verbal offer who had accepted, and that candidate has backed out, unfortunately. So we are reviewing that position. And then we have a telecom technician, the people who actually run the fiber and troubleshoot issues with the customer equipment. And so we're recruiting for that position as well. And we've reached out to begin interviews for that role. Dale has taken the lead in cleaning up some of our data so that our technical system is in line with our billing system. Historically, those 2 systems have been connected, but occasionally, due to vendor updates, that connection has been broken, which results in mismatches between the 2 systems. And so we've been identifying that and working toward, chipping away at that for a long time. But Dale has made a lot of progress in short order to get those systems aligned, and we do have that connection restored between those systems. So we anticipate good data going forward. And I also highlighted in the monthly update, which is available on the website, the other data cleanup efforts that we've been undertaking just to make sure that as we move forward for both the marketing and the record keeping that we have, everything is accurate and up to date. As the board knows, you approved some new tiers available to broadband and made a couple other changes. And so we've been working on implementing those and setting them up with the billing system. I want to thank Carol and her team and customer service, and also Dale for the work that's gone into this. There's been a lot of testing, a lot of coordination with our vendors to get everything set up. And so far it's looking good. I'll just remind everyone that depending on the speed that people want, it may take a little bit of engineering if we are at capacity. We don't want to oversubscribe to the point that some other ISPs do, so that customers have a negative experience and don't get the data speeds that we promise. So we're going to work hard to ensure that when people subscribe, they'll get the speed that they're paying for. And so we've just learned a lot in that process. So I'm looking forward to implementing that in January. And then finally, we continue to meet to discuss some of the goals and recommendations of the fiber broadband completion task force. And I expect that we'll have an update of some sort in the coming months. I'm aiming for February. And I might put together just kind of a presentation and just include it in the packet, because I know the board has a lot of agenda items and I don't want to take up the board's time, but I also want to get the information out there so that the board and the public know how we're tackling some of these recommendations. So we're just trying to create some information that communicates that to everybody. And that's all I've got. And I don't know if the board has any questions for Dale or would like to say hello or anything else.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Dale. It's
Hi,
great
Dale.
to meet you. Wendy,
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
I think you're muted, Wendy.
Sorry, I thought I turned that back off. So welcome, Dale. Welcome to the team. Glad you're on board. And Jason's a great leader, so I'm sure there's a lot that you'll collaborate on.
Oh,
I
I have seen that firsthand.
I'm sure. So this might be a question for Jason and Dave, and it's a little off topic, but we continue to struggle with staff turnover. And it's not, I think, to your efforts, but are we losing people because it's a competitive market and there's better opportunities? Is that what we're seeing here, sort of just market competition? And I know that within Concord, we're doing a HR compensation study. And can you just give a quick status on that? Because it's obviously over, it's time consuming for all of you, right?
Dave, why don't you start and then I'll tack on something.
So, yeah, I mean, some of it is the competitive market. People are leaving for more money. We did make some adjustments last year, or this year rather. But the class and comp plan is really the big thing that, we're looking for the results. They're well underway. So that's good. We want to make sure we're in market and competitive. You got to look at the total compensation, the insurance, all the benefits.
Yeah.
And that's what they're doing, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
So hopefully the results come back and show where we need to make changes and where we're good and that. But it is the case where it's very competitive out there. And if you're in a specialized position, it's really hard
Right.
to recruit and, to retain for that matter.
Yeah.
And like I said, we have lost a few to other entities, and
Yeah.
The report that Jason just gave on the network engineer, that was an accepted position. The candidate accepted it and then got offered a higher salary at a different place. So that's what we're up against, and it's a challenge.
Yeah, I think the town doesn't yet have a formal remote work policy, and I know the town is working on that to try to address those questions and concerns that a lot of candidates have. We also see a lot fewer candidates for certain roles, especially the ones in broadband and potentially the light plan as well. Just a smaller pool of candidates to choose from, and the town doesn't have formal agreements with recruiters or agencies that can help with placement, or that some people in the private sector might utilize. So we have to do a lot of word of mouth and advertise through traditional channels where there's just a sea of competition. And so it is hard to compare. I think that for these particular positions in broadband, we don't feel like the salaries are out of alignment with the market, even considering the private sector. But I think, a lot of network engineers are used to being able to work fully remotely, but this position really requires that we have people be on site to diagnose and troubleshoot issues with a network or with customers. So I think it's just a unique position, and so we have a smaller pool of people. But I think the things Dave mentioned hopefully will improve our chances going forward for recruitment.
Great. I appreciate the update. I know you're all working on it, so thank you.
Excellent. Any other questions on the broadband update? Seeing none, I think we're ready to move on ahead of schedule. Wow, that's unusual. For the 2023 budget. And this requires we open up. Oh, no, sorry.
No.
The next one requires the hearing. So Dave, would you like to lead this?
Yeah, I'll start this off, and Matt, you can jump in if I need. At the last meeting, we went through, Matt gave a presentation on the proposed 2023 budget. Fielded questions. You guys have had some time to look at it, I hope now. And so really the purpose here is for you guys to ask any follow-up questions that you may have. And then the result, we're looking for the board to vote to recommend the budget to the town manager. So we weren't planning on doing another presentation because we've already done that.
Yes, I don't have any follow-up questions. You did a great job answering questions during the meeting. I know it took a little extra time. Alice was not there, and I see she has a question. So please go ahead with your question, Alice.
Thanks. So I just want to acknowledge that when I got back, I reviewed the entire meeting on recorded that Dave was able to provide for me. And I went through the budget book and I listened to the budget discussion. So I felt that the presentation was very clear. I actually watched parts of it twice to make sure I understood. And Wendy's thoughtful questions were helpful for me to understand the budget. So I have no further questions. I just wanted you to know that I'm not coming in blind, that I had done some work to be prepared for today's meeting. So thanks all.
Very much appreciated. Wendy or Pam, do you have any additional questions about the budget?
No, I thought the presentation was excellent last week, or last when we met. So I have none. Thank you.
I have no additional questions either. We did go through a lot of detailed questions during the meeting that I was interested in, and as usual, presentation was great and really appreciated the details that we get each time. So thank you.
Excellent. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the budget?
I make a motion that we approve the 2023 budget as presented in our last meeting, based on our discussions.
I second.
Second,
Great, thank you. Alice,
yes,
Pam,
Yes,
Wendy,
Yes.
and I agree as well. So we've approved the budget for 2023. All right, we're flying through this. Now we're moving on to the 2023 rates, and this requires us to open up, make a motion for a rate hearing. So who would
I
like
make
to?
a motion, I make a motion that we open up a rate hearing for discussion of the 2023 rates.
second.
Thank you. Alice,
yes,
Pam,
Yes,
Wendy,
Yes.
and I agree as well. So we've opened up the rate hearing. Dave, would you like to proceed?
Yep, thanks. Laura, are you going to go through that presentation?
Yes, if I may.
You should be able to.
Okay, so. Can everyone see this PowerPoint title slide?
yes.
Electric rate changes, okay.
We can see it as in the presenter view, but we can see it.
Okay, so is it too small?
Not right now.
If you click at the top, Laura, where it says display settings, you can swap the presentation view at the very top of your other monitor.
On the upper left.
Yeah, where it says display settings, the one right over.
Ah.
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
And then just do swap presenter view and slideshow view, and then perfect.
Great.
Voila.
All right, thank you very much. So first, we're going to discuss the rates that are being proposed at this meeting, and then we'll go through some rate impacts, which I believe Warren requested, although he's not here, but may be informative for other board members. So rate change highlights, you just approved a 2023 budget that has a $36.5 million revenue requirement. So we have developed rates to meet each rate class's proportionate share of 2021 revenue. So we looked at what each rate class paid in 2021. It was a certain percent of the total, and that was applied to the 36.5 million to develop each rate class's revenue requirement. We presented those rates initially at the last meeting, and the board requested some changes. And so today we're going to present rates to you that incorporate those requested changes. The meter fees have been increased 6% for G2 and G3 rates and 10% for all the other rate classes. At the same time, in order to remain revenue neutral, the volumetric portion of the rate has been decreased. Distribution rates in general are up 17% from 2022. Energy is up 12% from January 2022, but is actually down 8% from July, when the additional power cost adjustment was placed into bills. So customers are generally going to see a decrease in their bill, but we're going to go over that more later. And the ETS rate was raised 7% from its previous 2021 share. So the new rates that we're proposing to you, and I've highlighted in yellow those that are changed from the ones that were presented at the meeting on the 7th. So in the R1 rate class, we'd initially proposed a $17.40 meter fee. That's been increased to $18.50, which is a 10% increase from 2022. And at the same time, we've lowered these capacity charges. we've received some comments based on the packet that was sent out on Friday that the desire and direction from the last board meetings, specifically from Brian, was that they wanted to see the distribution rate decreased and not the capacity charge increase. The reason that we did the capacity charges is because we told you at the beginning that we were not changing rate philosophy in the setting of the rates. And the way the rates were set based on the last cost of service study, the distribution rate is determined by taking the total distribution cost and dividing by the total energy sold to come up with one rate that is the same for all the rate classes. So you'll see this 0.06033 is attributed to every single rate class. And where rate changes are desired, they are implemented in the capacity charge. So I did listen to the recording, and Brian was very clear that he said lower distribution. I didn't take issue with it at the time. I knew we needed to lower the volumetric portion. And because of the way the mechanism is set up in the rates model, I chose to do it in the capacity charge. I'll point out that it makes no difference whatsoever to any customer, whether they receive the discount in the capacity charge or the distribution charge. Their bill impact will be the same. So just, be aware that we did make the changes in the capacity and not in the distribution. So this slide shows the residential rate, the rate assistance rider, the time of use rate, the heat pump rate, and the ETS rate. And the next page shows the residential net metering with banking and the 3 commercial general service rates. So you'll see that the G2 and G3 meter fee has been increased so that it is 6% higher than 2022. And their capacity has been lowered from what was previously proposed to you at the December 7th meeting. So I'm going to stop here before we go on to rate impacts and just see if there are any questions about the rates themselves.
So I have a question. I was struck by your description of calculating that variable distribution charge, being that the $10 million that needs to be collected divided by the number of kilowatt hours sold. There was no addition of the fact that our meter charges should be reducing that $10 million before we do that division based on kilowatt hours. And it makes me concerned because as we raise the meter charge, we're supposed to be lowering the variable distribution charge, because those are the 2 ways that we collect to fund for the light plant operations. They're outside of the power supply. What you've done is changed what we're collecting for the power supply. Now, you're right, it doesn't have an impact on the customers. They still see a reduction. But if we're going to do this time of use structuring based on expenses, we have to ensure that our mechanisms for collecting for these categories are consistent. And this is inconsistent. And I also don't understand why a change to the variable distribution charge, the reduction there, would have to impact why it couldn't be done across the board, because it should be done across the board, and the rate class should have their fixed meter charge increased accordingly, because we were working off of percentages. So I worked really hard to make sure that we, as a board, understood what we were asking for, and were very clear about our changes that we were requesting. And I feel that those weren't followed. And I am not ready to approve these rates. I'm going to let others speak. I see Alice has her hand up. Alice, I think you're muted.
Yeah, this is a part of the recording that I listened to more than once, so I fully understood what we were talking about. And if I understand it, which I think I do at this point, what you're proposing, Brian, is a request that would change the philosophy behind our rate structure, which is a different question, I think, that we're trying to answer than trying to adjust rates to be more in line with our costs. And I personally don't think I'm ready to change our whole philosophical approach to how we set the rates in accordance with our cost of service study, which I think we
So-
are aligned with.
I-
And so when I
I-
look at this distribution of the rate changes, what I see is they are cost neutral and these are okay. But once we start changing the percentages for a rate class or more than one rate class, that's a philosophy change that I feel like we need to address separately. And I think maybe as we meet it more frequently, we can look at the philosophy behind our rates.
So I don't see, so prior to the Baker Tilly study, we had this rate philosophy that I'm advocating for. And after we did Baker Tilly, we acknowledged they'd used a different method, but I don't believe we adopted that we're going to just not listen to the board and follow the cost of service study, lockstep. And that's what I'm upset about, is we are the rate setting authority. And we gave very clear instruction on how we wanted this done. Wendy, go ahead.
So just two things. One is because, as you know, I had to leave early last week. And so I agree that we wanted to increase the fixed charge 10% and that there was going to be an adjustment to the volume metrics. I was not there and did not catch any particular board instruction for distribution versus capacity. So just want to acknowledge that I wasn't there for that discussion. I am aligned with Alice in the concept of I don't want to radically change our methodologies. This has been our methodology to adjust the volumetrics in the way that Laura did. So I'm supportive of it at this point. I'm not ready to change that. I would like to ask Laura just the question about the 6% on the G3 and 4 rates, because I did expect a 10% across the board, but that might also reflect back on our historical approach to setting those fixed meter charges. So would like Laura to comment on that.
It was 6%, Alice, because Brian at the end of the meeting requested that 6%.
So
I wasn't there, so
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah, the original proposed rates had a 5% for many of the categories, but the G2 and G3 were a 3% rise. And so we just doubled those percentages, going from 5 to 10 and 3 to 6.
But based on what philosophy?
It was based on the proposed rates that Laura prepared for this year. So using the Baker Tilly method.
Well,
I'm not
okay, so the
following.
original fixed charges that I proposed were the ones that Baker Tilly had set out when they did their cost of service study back in 2019. So they, at that point, heard the board's desire to put more of the costs in the fixed portion and less in the variable portion. And they set out an increase over time to do that gradually, because you're trying to avoid rate shock. And so I took those proposed gradual increases, and that's what came out in the original proposal. I heard the board say, or at least some members of the board say, they wanted to accelerate the pace at which we converted, variable to fixed. And so that was the source of wanting to change these meter fees to begin with.
So
just it's worth acknowledging also that we do have this, the business community is paying a higher portion of our costs in general, I think, as that was a result of the cost study. So I'm actually not opposed to what Laura has done, and Alice, to the point of it being different, I'm comfortable with it. I think going from 5% to 10% was a concept of sort of doubling, if you will, accelerating the rate. So I'm comfortable with that approach. Just want to comment.
Well, I want to give you an example of why the variable reduction not being within the kilowatt hour distribution fee and being placed in capacity is harmful to certain customers. And the customers in my example are going to be the solar customers, because we have a fixed meter charge and we increase that by 10%. And we were going to reduce the variable distribution charge by an accurate amount so that we would keep net collections the same. But because we reduced the capacity charges and the solar distribution fee, the within the net metering rate, has now gone up. Instead of the proposed 3%, it's up 10%. So they are paying more. They're paying the same 6 cents on the variable distribution. They're paying more on the fixed distribution within the net metering rate, and they're paying the higher net metering rate. And they're getting the capacity and the capacity charges are reduced. This is increasing their bills because we decided to change which variable we reduced.
Brian, that is inaccurate.
How?
Because you requested that fixed charges be raised 10%. And so we raised both the meter fees and the solar net metering 10%. That was at the board's request. Aside from the solar net metering increase, the meter fee increase, whether you put the volumetric discount in the capacity or the distribution, makes no difference. Because even solar net meter customers are charged both capacity and distribution on their net quantities. So whether you take the money out of the capacity or the distribution, they're going to receive the same discount. The fact that they're paying more on the net metering distribution fee is part of the board philosophy to move more of the costs into the fixed portion. So that's, you're trying to take an apple and an orange and put them together, in my opinion.
I disagree. So the distribution fee within the net metering rate is there to have a fixed method of collection for the loss of the variable collection because of the net metering. And that was proposed at a 3% increase in your original proposed rates. And now it is a 10% increase. The purpose is to ensure that that variable portion that we're netting over the month keeps the light plant whole to collect for operations, so that those customers with solar were paying to support the light plant. That is now being increased from your proposed 3 to now 10. And because the reduction is in a different variable category, they're paying more. So, Wendy.
You know, I feel like we need a broader, I understand your point, Brian, but I feel like we're trying to make a quick decision when I feel like I want to go back to what we had done originally. And I'm looking back at last year's rate increases, and last year we had a 6% increase on net metering, and how does that align to what we had done previously? And it seems to align with the distribution increase from 21 to 22. What I see for residential, there's a 17% increase in distribution, but on the solar, it's a 10% across the board. So it actually looks less in some ways. So I don't have an opinion other than the concern about changing our approach to the methodology, and feeling like that's why we want to have these rate discussions in detail.
Yes, but when this board has been asked to do the rate discussions, we keep punting to this time of the year. And now we're rushing around the last week and a half to make these changes. So our process is effective. That's why we're talking about the agendas and planning out the topics for the following year. Alice.
Oh, so, sorry. Wendy said it much more eloquently than I could. I think what your proposal is asking us to do a philosophical change to the methodology of our rates. And I am not prepared to do that today. I hear that you are very frustrated and that you want your proposal to move forward. I'm not comfortable with doing that, because I'm not, as much as I am part of a board that is a rate setting board, I take my direction. I listen to the experts like Laura and Dave about how to set rates that are equitable. And we set a philosophy, and I think I should be able to find my records that we did vote to support, to align our philosophy with the Baker Tilly report, and that we would gradually increase our rates in alignment with the methodology. So to do something other than that, to me, requires a different level of discussion. We are at the end of the fiscal year. We are trying to make a decision by today, and I'm not prepared to change our methodology to do that. And I understand where you're coming from, but I'm not agreeing with that right now.
So
my
the reason
opinion.
that you're in this position is because we're out of time. And this is the
I
yearly.
can't
budget
fix the
vote.
time. I cannot fix that today when a decision is being called for.
But we will be right back here in the end of 2023
We
and
won't.
doing the
We
same thing.
won't. I
We
just-
did it in
could just-
2022. We had the same discussion and here we are today.
But in 2022, we started out having discussions on key rate philosophy. So January and February, we had a very detailed discussion about fixed rates. And I think that's why we all agreed that being more aggressive in that increase is agreed. But we didn't actually go through all the other outstanding rating discussions that we wanted to have. And that was our intent for the year. We didn't because we had many other priorities going on. But I guess to Alice's point, I just want to reiterate, I'm not ready to make a large change in our approach to setting the rates or the variables at this time.
Yeah.
So I know
Well,
that's frustrating, but we can do it later in the year also if we think that that's appropriate, but we need to have that discussion more thoroughly.
Pam, you haven't had a chance to speak.
Well, I just wanted to, cut through this from my point of view. I agree with Alice and Wendy. I'm not prepared to go that far right now. And I also defer to the reasonable explanations that I think Laura has provided. And at this point, given all the discussions we've had and there was a bit of a rush on direction at the end of the last meeting, although we did give some, I would just wanted to reiterate my support for what Alice and Wendy is saying.
Okay. I'm not supportive of these changes. So when it comes to voting, I'm not going to vote to support these changes. I think what we've done is this change makes the labeling of the variable charges meaningless. If we're increasing our collection for the operations of the light plant with a fixed rate increase, and then we're reducing our peak expenses on the variable, we're mixing the buckets. And that's what's got me so upset, is that we are going in the wrong direction for keeping this, directly relating what we label we're collecting for on the bill to the expenses we're actually paying for.
We are moving at a gradual progression, and that's what we agreed to with the Baker Tilly report. That we weren't. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I want to thank the board for committing to doing 2 meetings for the next few months so that we can have those detailed discussions that Wendy has pointed out, because they are very much needed. Does the board have any more comments, or Laura, would you like to make any more comments? Oh, I think you might be muted, Laura.
After looking at these rates, I wanted to just quickly go through what the impact on typical customers would be. So if we take a look at, this is a side-by-side mock-up of a residential bill for a customer who uses 650 kilowatt hours a month, which is the median amount for our residential rate class. This shows the rates that were in effect in 2022 with the larger PCA as effective beginning in July. So for a 650 kilowatt hour use, the last half of 2022, customers were paying $150.98. If we implement the rates that you just saw in the previous slides with the higher fixed charge and they're lower than the original proposed capacity and transmission, but they are higher than last year. And the new energy and distribution rates, but no PCA, because as Mark Howell pointed out last time, the whole purpose of this new rate is essentially to equate what our power expenses are with what we're collecting. And last year in our base rates, we didn't have enough, which is why we needed the PCA. Well, now we're going to put enough in the base rate, so we don't need a PCA. And the result is that the customer will pay less. A 650 kilowatt hour will pay $141.11, which is a $9.87 per month reduction, which is 7%. Now, that's just one residential customer using the median amount. And you can see, again, the reduction was $9.87. What we're going to look at here is what is the bill impact for customers using different quantities? And here is the 987 for the median. 869 happens to be the average for our residential rate class. This is what the numbers work out to be per month on the bill. And this is the percent of customers that fall into this class. So it's for those using 0 to 100, they're 5%. There's another 6% that use 101 to 200, etc. And the chart here graphically shows you, okay, there's going to be about 5% of the customers are going to see a roughly $6 increase on their bill. The other 6% get a $3 increase, which is somewhere around here. So you're up to 10%. And then this is the cumulative total. So you can see that about 50% of the customers here are experiencing a bill discount of about $11. So that's kind of what this chart shows you for the R1 rate. And we've done something similar for a G1 customer where the median is 486. They would see an $11.52 discount, which is 9%. And here's the distribution of outcomes for the G1 class. So they're pretty much going to see bill discounts across the board.
It's a
And
very
that's-
helpful chart.
Okay, that's I
Yeah.
haven't done that for G2 and G3, but this is kind of tells you a story about what customers can expect on their bills, and that's all I have to present, Brian. That just shows you what the statistics are.
Excellent. I want to ask if there's any other board questions about that last set of slides before I go on to audience.
Right, Brian, I had one question. It wasn't about the slides, but it was just a clarification. And Dave probably knows this because I sent a separate email. And by the way, Laura, those graphics are fantastic. And
Yes, I
it's
agree. I
sort of
love the
what
graphics.
what I expected to see based on the variable rates after the PCA, because it's great. And obviously every customer will be different based on their usage. I asked Dave a question separately because I know the PCA is expected to go down to 0, but in what's posted on the website is some power cost. It's not cost adjustment. What's the different term, Dave? So you know where I'm going. There's a different rate schedule that's posted on the website and you refer to it as a base cost. Can you just speak to that so that we understand?
Yes, so we sent out the tariff sheets.
Yeah.
And the PCA one has the base power costs in there. And Wendy had asked the question, she didn't see the 5.9 cents in there. And it's just the way the language is written. It always shows the base power cost because the PCA amount can adjust, monthly if you wanted it to. And so that's why you don't see the 5.9 cents in there. And Laura, I don't know if you want to expand on that at all.
Yeah, that tariff sheet basically shows, Wendy,
Yeah.
how much in base rates we are collecting for power supply. So I don't have the number off the top of my head, but whatever the new rate is, probably 14 cents. So the way it interacts with the actual PCA you see on the bills is every month. Let's say we want to change the PCA every month. We would compare what we actually spent for power during the month against that tariff rate of 14 point whatever cents. And whatever the difference was would be the PCA, whether positive or negative in a customer's bill. Does that make sense?
Yeah, conceptually, I got it. So part of it was just a consumer awareness to the fact that rate may not reflect what's aligned in the bill. And here we're talking about rates, but we're acknowledging that the PCA in essence is 0 starting on 1/1/23. Okay. Thank you.
I just want to ask Laura, when you sent us the redlined 23 rate sheets, the ETS still shows the proposed rate. I don't see a redline version of that.
That's probably, I'll have to look at it specifically, but I believe that's because we weren't proposing a change to that because they don't have a meter fee. So there's nothing to reduce on their volumetric because we didn't raise the meter fee because they don't have one.
The ETS, we were going to find a value that was higher than the proposed before their bills dropped dramatically. I was asking for the full 6 cents. And when we left the meeting, it was a consensus that we would find a number somewhere between the, fraction of a penny that is in the rate as proposed and the 6 cents.
That's not what I understood from the meeting, Brian, and to alleviate some of these differences in opinion of what the direction was and what we understood, it might make sense. I'm just throwing this out there to put some stuff down in writing.
Well, Dave asked me very clearly at the end of discussion to summarize where the board was, and I summarized it in the meeting. And we can go back and watch the video on exactly what I stated, which was, and it was Warren's suggestion that we find a number in between 0 cents and 6 cents.
So I heard you be in favor of that, and I heard Warren be in favor of something less than 6 cents. I didn't hear the other board members recommend that.
Well, we'll go back and look at the video again.
No,
But
mean, the
I
video's gonna
don't
show
feel
that
there
we
is a,
proposed 6
I don't
cents.
feel there's a method that I can communicate to this group about our intent that will actually turn into action. There is always a question about procedure, about there's always some exception. And this is what's so frustrating is this is the rate setting board. And we clearly stated what we wanted, and reinterpretation has developed something very different. So I don't believe that if I was to write it down or if I was to do something else, there would be some other reason why that wasn't good enough. Sorry. All right, Alice, please talk so I could stop. You're muted, Alice. Sorry.
You're right. I just want to recognize that Brian has done a great deal of work in studying rates, and this is something that he's been very much keyed into for a very long time. I think we also have to recognize that the board is not all aligned with Brian's philosophy on the rates right now. So when we hear comments saying that the light plan did not do what he wanted, it is a sense of the board was not ready to be aligned to do what Brian is suggesting. And I hear a frustration. And I think that having our multiple meetings a month may get at that, where we spend more time bringing the board to the same place. That I did not, after watching the recording twice, did not get a sense that the board was all in favor or in agreement on the rate philosophy change that was being proposed by Brian. And there was more of a comfort. And I know, Brian, you're frustrated by that. And I think it points out that our process is one that we need to all be in the same place. If we're going to request a rate change, the board has to be behind it, not one member of a board who happens to spend a great deal of time understanding and dealing with rates. It is a board decision, not a board chair decision.
Right, but we have to rely on staff to provide the calculations and the analysis. And when we request those calculations and analysis and we get back something different, we have to, what do? We go to these meetings, we have discussions, but we can't run the numbers real time. And that's what I think is needed for everybody to understand the impacts of these and to actually, move forward. So, is there any other board comments before I go to the audience? Pam.
just wanted to, I think that the discussion at the last meeting was very fruitful, very complicated. Issues were raised right before that meeting, and I'm not challenging you, Brian, but we did not have a lot of time to digest what you had said. And I thought that we did a really serviceable job at trying to understand and come to some kind of direction for for Laura and Dave. And I think that they did, to the extent that there was any clarity, which I think is too strong a word, they did try to reflect what the discussion said. And so I do support, I don't want to, I think that there was a really honest effort from the experts to reflect what the discussions were and to move us forward marginally. So I'm comfortable with what they provided. Laura, if you think there was any mispresentation, or if you think that there's some truth in what Brian said, that you want to clarify, go for it. But I don't, I would imagine you're okay with the presentation you made.
Yeah, the only thing I would state is that what I could have done better is at the very end, when Brian was saying, okay, we're agreeing, we're going to raise the residential 10 and the commercial reader fee 6, and we're going to reduce the distribution. I probably should have piped in at that point and said, well, actually, we're going to reduce the capacity because of the mechanism and the way that it's calculated. But in the past, sometimes the board is a little loose on their terminology, using kilowatts when they mean kilowatt hours or vice versa. And I try to understand the intent. I don't pay as much attention to the strict words. And I understood the intent to be, we need to lower the volumetric portion to be revenue neutral. And so we wanted to make sure we hit the intent. But I should have spoken back at the time and said, no, Brian, it's not going to be the distribution, it's going to be the capacity, so that we wouldn't have this mass confusion that we have now. But I'm glad that you all recognize we are trying to do what we understand the board's intent. And I suggested maybe in writing, just because writing is usually a little bit clearer than verbal. And then the board could also, vote on that. It would be very helpful for us, because it's difficult for us to interpret when there are differing opinions, especially. Thank you.
Wendy.
I'll be quick. I just want to reiterate, to what Laura's point is, I do the same. When Laura said volumetric, I was assuming we were just following our methodology. So, and again, I wasn't here when we had the explicit discussion on distribution, but in the ETS, I do recall not wanting to modify our approach to that ETS rate structure at the time. And again, I had to leave the meeting early, so was not there when the board agreed, or when Brian had commented on the ETS change. So can't add to it at this point.
Well, if we vote in this change to ETS, they're going to see a large drop in their billing come January, and they will be on a long-term multi-year schedule to get back to the off-peak rate once we do time of use. So it's either that or rate shock for them to have it drop and come back. So that I expressed that in the last meeting. And that was why Warren was saying, well, we don't have to do one or the other. We have somewhere in the middle. And I will send that YouTube video, and I will put it at a time where we do that summary when we finish discussions, so that you can see exactly when Dave asked me to summarize where the board was and when the board was present, and I summarized it, and there was no objections. So you can all rewatch that and listen to this discussion and see where you are. Is there any more board or other comments from Dave or Laura? No. Pamela Dritt, you've been waiting very patiently. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Pamela Dritt, 13 Concord Green. Thank you all. I know everybody's trying to do what's best and fairest for the town, but you can't separate out rate philosophy from what you're doing, because it's inherent in it. It has incentives and disincentives. And right now we're punishing solar residents who can't get the kind of support and financial incentives that they could if they didn't live in Concord. That's the opposite of what we want to do.
So,
We
Pamela, I would ask for the rate hearing that you be specific about the rates or overarching rate structures. Public and liaison comments, you can add more, you expound more.
Well, I think we need to do, you can't make rate decisions without looking at what their impacts are on the customers and the various groups of customers. So I really appreciated Laura putting up, how the rates would change for specific customers, but she didn't do it for the solar customers. And that's where we want the town to go. Everybody who can have solar should. We need to financially incentivize that and not disincentivize it. I want to say I don't think we should be reducing rates overall at all, because the cost is going to go up, not down, as we transition from fossil fuel to solar and wind and battery. And we need to finance that for the light plant. So lowering rates is a big mistake.
Okay. Mark, do you have a comment you'd like to add?
I do. It's really in the form of a question. And I appreciate the examples that were given. So it really comes from an understanding that I don't have about the power cost adjustment and the source of the costs that are reflected in a power cost adjustment. So it's probably something Laura can handle pretty easily. The question really is, when we had the power cost adjustment last year, I think we all recognize there's a lot of dynamics in the energy industry today, and we can expect those to continue. Is that cost related primarily to energy that's procured on the spot market, or is that cost coming to us through terms that are in some of the base contracts, the base load contracts that we've already signed? So, how we always talk about there's 80% is contracts that we have and 20% is spot purchases. And so the concern, or the question behind my question, is about the risk that we go ahead and we make these adjustments, and then the energy market zigs when we think it's going to zag in the next year, and suddenly we find ourselves in a few months, looking at another power cost adjustment. So I just didn't understand whether it's the 20% that's driving it, or whether it's a broader base of the energy that's doing that. So hopefully that's a clear enough question that you can handle.
It's the 20%.
Yeah. So
the fixed contracts that we buy don't generally change. There's some have escalations, but one of the benefits we get is that they are truly fixed in cost, and we don't experience any price increases on those contracts. We do sometimes layer in new contracts that can also affect the power supply cost, but in general, most of the variation you're seeing is coming from the 20% on the spot market. And to your comment about if the market zags when we think it's going to zig, that's really what the PCA is for. And it can go in either direction. Like, so we set rates this year to collect what we think power is going to cost us in 2023. But if it turns out to cost us less, we can actually put a negative PCA in the bills. Or if it ends up going up again, and we have to put more on, then that's what it's for.
Yeah. I was almost afraid that was your answer, because, when you think about it, that was an extraordinary amount of additional revenue that was necessary for a relatively small percentage of the overall energy. So the logical follow-up to that answer is, are we seeing contract expirations that are going to be costly to renew or refill? And when does that start to impact the rates? Is that beyond 23? So it's not a concern for this upcoming budget?
So, we look at least 5 years into the future on a mark-to-market basis. And right now, I'm not seeing, with current forward prices, huge impacts on rates. In other words, what we set for 2023, they may actually go down a little bit in 2024 because the market is inverted or backwardated a bit. But I don't see any huge changes, Mark, and they're not necessarily all up.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Mary,
Hi, thank you. My name is Mary Hartman. I live at 16 Concord Green. I'm also a member of the Select Board. I'm not going to pretend to understand the complexities of the rate schedule or the rate structure, but I do have a question. If I were to run into someone on the street, I think they would expect their energy costs to go up next year. I think that's the expectation. And I see on the schedule that we're increasing meter charges and distribution and capacity. I see all these increases 17 to 24%, and yet the overall bill is expected to go down by 6%. So I don't understand that. I don't have an easy answer to someone I run into at Crosby's or something like that. And so I'm wondering, is there a simple solution? That's my first question. And is this going to hurt us down the road? Are we going to expect a big increase later on? So if someone could give me a simple explanation for why rates are going down, why we expect rates to go down even though everything's going up, I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll take a crack at that. So
Great.
basically, we were extremely forward-looking and fast. In 2022, when we saw the market take off after the invasion of Ukraine, we said, we got to start collecting more money in rates now. We didn't wait. And we put a big increase on because prices at the beginning, when just the invasion occurred and over the summer, were just enormous. Since that time, they've moderated a little bit. And so essentially, Mary, you're right, the individual elements like the meter, capacity, distribution, energy are all going up. But what we're doing is we're discontinuing the PCA, which was 5.9 cents. So the other elements we're increasing are not 5.9 cents, and that's how the overall bill goes down. So we reacted so quickly and so fast, we got ahead of it. Okay, and so we started
When you increased it in July. Okay.
We got the 5.9 cents, and it didn't turn out to be as bad as that. Right?
Okay.
We're thinking the prices have moderated somewhat. Oil's been going down, gasoline prices have been going down. And so now that we're setting 2023 rates, they can be set at a rate that's albeit higher than it was on January 1st, 2022, but is not as high as what it ended up being on July 1st, 2022. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. But my second question is, are we headed for a big increase later on, or is that too hard?
That's, I wish I knew the answer to that question. And I wouldn't be sitting here right now if I did. Because a lot of people want to know the answer to that. And that's why we have the PCA. But we will watch it like a hawk. And if we see things getting out of hand either way, we'll put the PCA on so that we don't get behind on revenue.
Thank you.
A simple explanation for someone at Crosby's is the PCA, or power cost adjustment, is an adjustment because every January we Laura develops what she feels the rates will be needed to be set at to collect for expenses. And the PCA is there for unexpected things like the Ukraine war affecting energy markets. And so if we've set these rates too high and we find in July that they're collecting too much, we can do a negative PCA. If we find that something else goes on in the energy markets and the price goes up, we can put a positive PCA to correct that, such that we collect what we need to at the end of the year. But that's the purpose of the PCA.
Okay. Thank you.
David.
Surely this very last set of X changes illustrates the extraordinary service that we get from our Light Planet crew. There was that kind of foresightedness that number can actually go down a little bit now. I would have put my own word in here in support of writing down conclusions of this sort, as Laura has suggested and proposed. We've seen today quite sharp split between one member and other members of the board. Our staff can only work with what finally is concluded. I think it is a quite important suggestion that matters like this in the future, writing them down requires actually coming to, even if it's a split consensus, a consensus. You finally have a vote and there you go. We've just seen, as I've suggested, extraordinary service that we get from our light plan. Let's further support them with just this sort of clarity. Thanks.
Yes, and that is why I added the background and purpose to the agendas. And when we're done discussions, I try to do a clarifying statement about where I feel discussions ended is to come up with a consensus of the board on these topics. Writing it down is another step, but then again, it could rehash the discussions if we can start in a circle on some of these topics. So I'm doing my best on trying to, I know that when we vote on rates right now, that I'm going to be outvoted, and that's okay. But I think it's, as long as everybody knows what we're doing and understands, and that's what we need to spend a lot of these extra meetings on, is building that understanding of rate setting and so forth. I think if we understand what we're doing, it'll become easier to find consensus. Pamela, you've already spoken in the rate hearing. Do you have a quick comment?
Quick question. Are the coming smart meters able to support a virtual power network? A local VPN? VPP?
Oh, that is not necessarily related to rates, and I'd like to
Oh,
close.
but it is, because it
Well, we're talking about this year's rates, and we don't have an AMI system in place. I'd like to do that as a public and liaison comment. Can you hold it till then?
okay. Can I ask then? Do we have a method of using some of the rates to support things like the middle school expenses, capital expenses, that will have the ultimate goal of lowering rates for everybody, but have to be, and electric school bus fleet, for instance?
Yeah, so this is about the rates that we collect, not
Exactly.
the use of that money. So I'd like to hold that for the liaison and public comments.
And I would like to suggest that you do not lower the rates, no matter how, because we know we having these expenses come up that we're going to need to have money for, and having a rate shock change
Okay.
is more detrimental than anything else.
Pam Hill.
Just briefly, reflecting on the last meeting and the complications of communication, I think one thing that the board needs to do, and I'm remiss myself, is when we don't have consensus, being clear that we don't. Because I think last week, the last meeting, we captured thoughts, but then they became codified in a way, and then frustrating to you, Brian, I think. So just urging us not only to write things down when we have consensus and to help Laura and Dave, but also to be clear when we don't.
Yeah, thank you, Pam. Sorry, I don't know how to, how do you pronounce your first name? I'm sorry, Halvor?
Halvor.
All right, I'm sorry, it's unusual to me.
But you can call me Hal.
Okay, Hal, thank you. What was your question?
I have a central ETS system in my house. Hal Iverson, 55 Potter Street. I have a central ETS system in my house, and And I gather that future ETS rates are very much in play. And I wonder if there is any information available that we ETS users could look at that would give us an idea of what's at stake with regard to our ETS rate.
Well, right now, the proposed change is the energy charge is going up according to all rates. The energy charge has gone up. And there's just been I don't know the exact amount that it's gone up for distribution, but it's 0.00175 fraction of a penny per kilowatt.
It's a
So-
17% increase over what they're paying, which is the same as the increase that the R1 rate class is paying for distribution.
And what is that in pennies?
It's the difference between 0.0015 and 0.00175. It's 25 basis points.
Yeah, so it's very, it says 17% makes it sound large, but it's a very small increase.
I think what Hal's asking about though is in the future, you know, how you're referencing a big jump in increases because you're assuming, Brian, that the ETS rate is going to be dissolved and those customers will go to TOU. But I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that is one of the 5 areas I've said the board needs to review and address is whether or not the ETS rate will remain as a special rate, as they also need to decide about the heat pumps, you know, and also about load control. So these are some of the topics that I think you're going to plan to address in 2023. And so how the important part would be to, you know, maybe participate in those meetings that are specific to ETS that are going to happen in, I guess, 2023.
And so, Hal, I would take a look at the time of use rate and see the value for off-peak electricity. And that would be a maximum, whereas today's rate would be the minimum. So somewhere in there would be any change. And it's about a 6 cent gap.
Okay, good. That's exactly what I needed. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm the one pushing for raising that rate, and I'm willing to talk to you or any other ETS customer on the reasons I have for why.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that too.
Okay. You have any other questions?
No.
No. All right. We need to vote to close the rate hearing. Would someone like to make a motion? Wendy, I think you're muted.
Sorry, yes, I'd like to make a motion that we close the rate hearing and return to the regular meeting.
Great.
Second.
Second,
Okay.
Alice,
yes.
Wendy,
Yes,
Pam,
Yes.
I agree as well. I'm just going to write down the time right now. All right. So next on the agenda is to vote on approval for the 2023 rates. Does the board feel they're ready to go ahead and vote on the rates as a group, or do we want to do each rate? And if we need to, let me know, Laura or Dave, procedurally.
You can vote them all at once. It's been done in the past. We've also done them individually, so it's really a board preference.
I would prefer to vote on all of them, but if anyone has a request to do each one individually, let me know. I see some heads shaking now. Okay. Could I have a motion to approve the 2023 rates as redlined in the latest version?
I make a motion that we adopt the 2023 rates as distributed with our minutes from our meeting materials.
And a second?
Second,
Great. Pam,
Yes.
Alice,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes,
and I'm going to vote no. And so they are approved. Next we have on the agenda, and I think we're back on schedule, is the topic of the middle school and the funding article that we plan to bring to town meeting. Dave, would you like to take this?
Sure. So in the packet, I put together a draft warrant article for borrowing for the middle school solar. It certainly is open for red line. I only had a little time on Friday to do it. So it really is a draft, and I can share that on the screen if the board would prefer.
That would be helpful.
Okay, let me do that.
and usually, Dave, this language gets reviewed by internal counsel, et cetera, right? So I don't mean to wordsmith it, but our focus is predominantly on the dollar threshold.
Yeah, so can you guys see that?
Yep.
Okay,
Do you mind increasing the Word document zoom and just bottom right of the yeah,
yep. How's that?
Much better.
perfect.
Okay, so this is what I put together. It's pretty broad, but Wendy's correct. It does go to bond counsel for review. So, open to, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to change it significantly. It's more of a starting point.
I don't see anything wrong with the language. I think it covers many of the ways that this money could be spent. And the 5.5 million that's listed here is today's ballpark on the cost of the system without receiving a TCI or some kind of federal incentive. Is that correct?
Correct. So that is the number, that the latest number we have from Solar Design Associates for the rooftop and canopy array at the middle school. It does not include a battery because we haven't we've designed a location for the battery and put in the conduits and all that, but we haven't come to a conclusion on, are we going to buy one, do a PPA, do a lease arrangement? So those are some things that we need to discuss, but we know that we're putting solar in, and this is what that would cover.
Okay. Alice, do you have a question?
I just wanted to acknowledge that I reviewed this and I had sent a note to Dave and he responded that the language here for somebody who is not following all of the warrant articles doesn't actually say anywhere how we'll use this money except in the title of the warrant article. It says light plant solar expansion. I think to be clear for people who are reading this for the first time at town meeting, that we acknowledge that it's all of the engineering design and legal service, blah, 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 for the purposes of constructing on-site solar canopies for the middle school construction project. So it gives a context for what we're asking the money to do. Otherwise, it looks like it's a general operations fund for any future design and construction project. So I would just make it clear that we say that this is for this middle school solar in the body of the article. And I would assume that it's broad enough if we say that it will include whatever design we need to do. I hear Dave saying they've designed the battery conduit, et cetera. But if there's additional design work needed to allow for the battery, that would be included in the same language so that we're doing all the design costs at the same time. And I know it doesn't include the cost of the battery.
Yeah, well, I would expand this to allow this money to be used for a battery should we find that we get a 30% credit. We wouldn't have necessarily, where the purpose is for the solar array, but I would hate for that to come in at 4 million and leave $1.5 million authorized when we decide to do storage and have to go back to town meeting. Because going to town meeting, the reason we're doing it today versus a year from now is because of the lead time we need for bidding and for other aspects. So if we find that we have a storage opportunity for that site, and I wouldn't want to be dependent on going back to town meeting. So adding language is that this could be used for energy storage would be helpful, in addition to Alice's comments about how the design could include energy storage design.
Well, then the question is the 5.5 million adequate? And I think that
Not
the
for
answer to
storage.
that is it's not.
No.
And so it would be, we would need to go back at some point for another, I think we saw the estimate was as high as 5 million for battery storage. Is that right, Dave?
It's higher than that.
So we've been looking at a much different dollar figure in this warrant article. If we included this storage at this point, I do agree that we should have monies available, or able to use some money for the design if it's appropriate for the solar, for the battery storage, but it does not include the cost of battery storage here.
Wendy,
I just wanted to reiterate that, but so if we include the design for the battery, it seems odd that we wouldn't include the cost for the battery. And Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, when we did the capital planning, we assumed 2 million for a battery and that an additional 2 million would come from depreciation, and we hadn't determined whether it's a lease or PPA. So would it really be 5 million or is it 2 million? Or I guess in general, we need to be prepared to speak to the article that it's in or it's out, and then what the cost is and how we would handle that expense for the battery. So maybe we could just clarify what we think that cost is.
So
On that.
I think a couple things that might help clarify. In terms of the design for the battery, what we've designed so far is basically the footprint and the conduit runs and a tie-in point to our switchboard. So that all had to be done as part of the design for the middle school, and that's not included in this article. The battery itself, once we install one there, would be interconnected with the existing stuff. So at that point, you'd have additional costs. So the money here wouldn't be to design the battery because it's a fairly simple thing in comparison to what we've already done, which is what we needed to do for the middle school project itself.
Okay.
so Dave, what are your thoughts on the wording in relation to storage for this?
I mean, I think Alice is on point. We do need to add some language here. And like I said, I did this fairly quickly because, it was a last minute request so that we could have something to talk about. So I think there's room for improvement, no question about it. Really, if we added the battery piece in there, even if we, end up using some ARPA funds and we get that 30% inflation reduction money, we're still talking about a good chunk of money, and that would only leave, maybe $1 million to $1.5 million left. So you could add the storage in there, but I think it might give the wrong impression to the citizens and ratepayers that the 5.5 would cover solar and storage, because that's not necessarily what's going to happen or what would happen.
Yeah, so I was thinking the inverse concern, which is that we were asking for 5.5 this year. We go back to town meeting next year for an energy storage, and we didn't use 30% of this money. And they think, oh, we are asking for 5.5 plus the full cost of the battery. That would add to what they thought the battery cost. So one way or the other, I think that's fine. I don't need to see that language change that I suggested. I think Alice's language change is appropriate. Alice, do you have another question?
No, I'm sorry. I should lower my hand. Sorry. Thank you.
All right. Any other board members have questions?
Alice, could you send me your suggested changes?
Sure.
That would
Sure.
be helpful. Thank you.
Pamela Dritt, do you have a comment related specifically to this article?
Yes, I have a question. Why is the amount of funds not include more than you think you're going to need, and including the battery? Why ask for separate times? Each time you have to go to town meeting to get one approved, it's a big risk. And it makes us town members feel like, this isn't being, I think we should ask for more than we think we'll need and include all of the things, including the battery, all at once. Buying a car piecemeal, this much for the motor, this much for the body, it rubs your face in the amount of money that you have to spend, which you have to spend anyway. Let's do it all at once. Why pick?
All right. Thank you, Pam. I do understand where Pamela is coming from. But I also think that if we were to ask for 10 million or over for this project, that we get more pushback than starting with what we need for the school to open, which is the solar array and the canopies.
But you need the battery too, because it's the whole power system of the entire town.
Eventually,
Not just for the middle school.
batteries could be sited somewhere else in town as well. So we don't want to fix the battery to this site necessarily. So that's, I think, why the strategy of doing 2 requests, one this year, one next. But Pam Hill, do you have a question?
Yeah, I actually agree with Pamela Dritt in her general point of view on this. I think that segmenting things like this to soften the blow, as it were, if that's the motivation, which I'm not sure it even is not a good idea. I think we need to tell the town the real story, and to the extent that we can tell it comprehensively, I think that's better. And I think that the messaging that what the town has asked for over the years to increase our greenhouse gas, reductions, to increase solar, et cetera, that costs money. And I think that the board should be getting that message through, that things cost, and also that we should be thinking about these things as comprehensively as possible. And if we can, in this instance, we should, but it sounds like we're not quite there yet. But I do think that we need to be thinking more comprehensively and tell the story like it is, without segmenting to soften blows that are important financial commitments that we need to be making, which will be costly.
Wendy.
Yeah, hi. So I somewhat support Pam, but I'm also concerned that we don't actually know the true cost, and the longer we wait, the cheaper the cost of the battery is. So I think we have an opportunity to message the town around the solar project, and that at the same time, we as the light board and the plant have plans for battery storage, and that we expect there'll be future funding, but we don't know enough about that at this point in time. So I don't want us to put something out and put the whole solar project at risk because we don't have the full details. So that's my concern. But I do understand people's perspective. But we have an opportunity to reflect what we know and what's coming too.
Alice.
So I just want to acknowledge that what we're talking about is how best to communicate with our constituents and our customers. And I think that's a bigger conversation, how we're going to, in a sense, market what we're doing and letting people know exactly what's involved in building the middle school solar project. One alternative, I am happy to write a draft or add my comments to this draft of the solar expansion article, but it could be to say that we are seeking to raise funds or borrow by not to exceed a number, so that we don't have to bond for the full 10 million, that we could bond for something smaller, but we're asking for permission. If all of a sudden the rates of battery storage go down, we have opportunities through ARPA funds and others, and we have a better idea of the funding, that we can alter that number by having a not to exceed.
Dean, would you like to add to the conversation?
Yeah, just briefly, Dean Banfield, 73 Walden Terrace. Thanks for this opportunity. The thing that's sort of swirling around behind all of this is the actual design that we are trying to fund. And I've not been able to find any presentation of that or document of what that is. And I'm wondering if the board has seen the design that we're trying to fund for $5.5 million. Could Dave please make that available for public inspection or for the inspection of the school building committee, who I don't think has seen it either. So I'm just asking for a little bit more information about, you know, as Alice just pointed out, you're trying to do some communication with your customers and your, you know, constituents, and this is a black box that we are funding for which we haven't seen anything yet. So that's just my question, and if we can get that out in the public, I'd appreciate it.
So the school building committee has a copy of the design that Solar Design Associates did. That's out there. It's 60%.
Just to be clear, Dave, that it's not obvious to me that 100% design that you said would be available just before Thanksgiving has been distributed to that committee. Has it been distributed to the chairs? Has it been distributed to the committee? Who has that?
So
otherwise, I'm done. Thanks.
Yeah. So we have shared where Solar Design Associates is with the design. You know, we can share that with the public. It's fine, but it's subject to change. It's not 100%. It's the 60% design drawings. They've made adjustments to them as recently as this week. So things keep evolving as things come up. But yeah, we don't have a problem sharing that. It's public.
So it's public, but the public doesn't have it. Can you put it on a website? Can there be a place where the public can get it? That's all.
Yeah, we can do that. Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, we'd also talked about having a public meeting specifically on this design and what the aesthetics would be. That's on our list of things we've got to do.
So we have to with the warrant.
Yeah, and to that point, Brian, I was thinking that meeting in either late January, or early February would probably be the best time.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Yeah. David.
On this question of how fulsome to be in the discussion at town meeting, just the 5 million or the battery as well. I think the fact of there being a special town meeting here in January is an object lesson in that regard. As we all know, the whole issue is, oh my goodness, there's more that's going to have to be paid. Are we actually going to go there? Folks are happiest when they think they have been told the largest story that can be told. I think that's very strong encouragement when the 5 million is presented, to also note that we don't know how much it's going to be, but storage is probably going to be part of this. And my goodness, it may even be a roughly similar amount. If people have the information up front, they feel like they're included, and there's not the, oh my goodness, now we got to come back and address it again. Thanks.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Mary, just about to close discussion, but Mary,
Okay,
go.
good. Thank you. Thank you. I would strongly urge the board to let the town know exactly how much they think this is going to cost, including the storage. The town has already expressed a strong, well, actually, the town wants this building to be use solar. So we know they're committed to it. It's your responsibility to let them know how much that's going to cost. And the not to exceed number will give you enough headroom so that you can do both. Both. I think in the spirit of full disclosure, the town should know, and I think the town will support it, but they should know how much this is going to cost. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. Dave, do you want to have any additional thoughts on this? Or
No, I mean, we did mention what the estimate was last year at the hearing for storage. So, you know, we could update those numbers. I think, you know, for me, the big one is, you know, we don't know if we're going to actually, you know, do a third-party agreement or purchase a storage outright. So, you know, we're committed to storage at the location, but we just, for me, it was a hard thing to put in there, not knowing which direction we were going. So, you know, we can certainly include it if the board think that that's the direction you want to go, but I was just struggling with that piece.
So I think that's actually a really valid point that we, in the discussion underneath the language of the warrant, we can actually say that. So you have the language of the warrant article that has a not to exceed number. And the explanation below is that given the uncertainty of additional fundings available through X, Y, and Z, this money has been built into the request for in the bonding. It may or may not be used.
Wendy,
I just want to support, I think putting a not to exceed dollar threshold is a great idea, and we will have lots of opportunity to explain it, and we can even say what we know will be the solar specific component of it, because we'll have time at that point to say what we do know and what we don't know. So Alice, appreciate any contributions you can make to the warrant article language.
Okay, I'll try and send it to her.
Pam Hill, would you like to add?
Yeah, just very quickly to reiterate, I think that being as clear as we can about both certainties and uncertainties comprehensively is extremely important. And I think whatever Alice can do to give a picture that the town can understand when we say things are not clear, but here's, so I just think it's very, very important on all of this stuff with the middle school, especially that we are giving everything we possibly can with respect to certainties, uncertainties, and a comprehensive view. So thank you, Alice, for doing that.
All right, Pamela, final thoughts?
And also, I think we should also add in some estimates, they don't have to be accurate, of the amount of money we're going to save by doing this, so that the town knows that isn't just an expensive thing to be green, that it actually is going to save us money.
Yeah, great. Dave, do you feel you have enough feedback with Alice providing written feedback as well?
Yeah, I think, Alice and I can kind of work together and come up with some modified language.
Okay. I'd like to move on to
One quick more thing.
Can I move on? Pamela, I want to move on to public and liaison comments, please. So now, Pamela, go ahead.
I think that the electrification of the school buses and the use of those school buses for as mobile battery backup for the town's electricity is also an infrastructure that is included in the whole system. And one of the problems with separating out each little thing is that we never get the whole system designed to get our maximum benefit and for the future that we want to have, which is green and cheap.
Yep, that's the strategy.
It's the win-win-win-win-win thing.
Right.
So can we associate the future benefits every time we talk about a current cost, so that people recognize that it isn't just a cost that we'll use up, it's a cost that will save us money in the future.
Great, thank you. Dean.
Hi, thanks again. So it's December 14th, and Article 38, which was passed at last year's town meeting, indicated that there would be a conversation with both the select board and the finance committee regarding a plan that would be developed for the development of solar in the future, identifying locations and a schedule. I've been watching these meetings for months. Maybe 2 months ago, there was a status report on Article 38. There was no outline developed. There was very little progress. There were a few comments about, site locations. And since then, nothing. And so to me, that's really not a good progress report. I'm considering asking the town meeting this coming year in the warrant for a task force to take this on, because we've really not done anything this year to the schedule that was asked for. And really nothing. There's nothing in this meeting that's been shown. So I feel as though some additional work needs to be done, and the town probably needs to develop a separate task force to take this planning on and develop a plan to get some solar built in the town. So that I'm seriously considering bringing a warrant article this year, asking for the town to develop a task force with this task, because this is not worked out this year. Thanks.
Thank you for the heads up. I appreciate it. I don't want to go into a discussion of Article 38 during public and liaison comments, but thank you, Dean. Is there any other public comments? I don't see any, so I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn. Alice, do you mind making a motion?
I move the meeting is adjourned.
All right, a second. I see Wendy gave a second. Alice,
Yes.
Pamela,
Yes.
Wendy,
Yes.
and I agree as well. Thank you, everyone.